To new business, we're going to have the sewer presentation. So if I could have you guys come up, have your slides queued up here. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves to our residents.
All right. Good evening. I'm DPW Superintendent Jacob Zwicker,
And I am the sewer administrator, Kathleen Kayer.
and we're here to present to you an update on the new sewer rates. Kathy, if you want to start?
Sure. Just to give you a little bit of background, and what you'll see on the slides is pretty much what was discussed in all of the public hearings that we held. But basically, Mass DOR, they set the guidelines for best practices and how utilities should be setting their sewer rates. So they consider, one of their best practices is, it's called full cost recovery. And it's basically through your fees and charges to be able to fully sustain all of your expenses in your sewer utility. That's everything from operation and maintenance to capital, debt service, purchasing capacity, and emergency reserves. So we kind of try to follow that when we set our rates, as we follow kind of like the state guidelines or what they put out there. And a utility is allowed to collect revenues that do cover the full cost of running your sewer system. So if we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to point out that there were 3 public meetings that were held by the Sewer Commission to discuss this. We had a work session on January 22nd of this year. We had a public sewer meeting on February 12th, and we had a public hearing on March 26th. And all of these meetings were publicly advertised, as we do welcome participation from the public and input for discussion. So we, all the stuff that we'll go over tonight, we did have at those meetings as well. So just to give you a little bit of background about the Sewer Enterprise Fund. So when we do our annual budget, those have to be balanced, right? So when we do the Sewer Enterprise Fund and we present our budget at town meeting, we have to have enough revenues coming in to cover our expenses. And quite often those fall short, even when we are estimating them. So we have to put up a certain number that will be used from retained earnings to balance the budget. So that's something that we do every year. Another best practice with sewer utilities is emergency reserves. So we really need to be self-sufficient. If there's an emergency, we need to be able to cover that. And one of the best practices, you want to put aside 25% of your O&M budget, as well as the cost of your largest capital item if you needed to replace that as well. That is the best practice. It's, even though we put aside money for emergencies, we have not been able to get to that point just because you have to work within the confines of your budget. Ideally, in a perfect world, when you're doing your budget, you should be not touching those amounts of money and using what's left to offset your budget. So over the past few years, there has been a really tremendous increase in our expenses. I'd say over the past year or two. And I think the public in general, probably in their everyday lives, has seen a lot of increases in everything. Well, we've been hit really hard as well. So what's been happening is over the past 2 years, more of our retained earnings are being used just to balance our budget and to pay for our budget. And that's just not sustainable in the long term. Our goal is always that if there's a sewer emergency, we want to have enough money within our enterprise fund to cover that and not come to the town and ask for money. So the sewer users should be paying for anything sewer related. We don't want to have to come and ask the taxpayers for money to replace any of our items. So we're trying to be very fiscally responsible with that as well. So if we go on to the next one, I wanted to give you some examples of just over the past year and so what some of our costs are and how our expenses have risen. So we have 17 municipally owned pump stations throughout the town that we are fully responsible for paying all expenses for. So just an example is every year we budget in our budget for two replacement pumps. Different pump stations have different pumps, different sizes, different types, and they all cost different amounts of money. So what we do is when we set our budget, we always ask for quotes for our largest replacement pump because you don't know what's going to go that year. So just as an example, when I did the budget in December, we reached out to our vendor and asked for a quote for one cost for a pump this year, and our largest pump would be an $80,000 cost just to replace a pump in a pump station. and we always budget for 2. So that's that went up from fiscal 25 to fiscal 26, that increased by 45% from the cost estimate we had the year before for our largest pump. Utility costs alone, and that's your electricity, your gas, and your water at 17 pump stations in fiscal 25 was close to $100,000. That's just for your utility costs. And I know residents can understand that in their own personal bills, just the cost of your utilities going up every year. So for us, it's that times 17. Another example is odor control measures. Just for that, we spend about $46,000 a year, for the 17 pump stations to try to implement different measures to keep your odor control under control, because that's something that, we try very hard, and our field crew works very hard on realizing that these pump stations are in people's neighborhoods. We get complaints, especially in the hot, humid weather, when we have stuff that's very stagnant in the air, and so we invest a lot of money to try to offset that. And lastly, intermunicipal agreements. So those are agreements that we have with our neighboring towns. So Dracut, Chelmsford, and Lowell, we have intermunicipal agreements. We call them IMAs. And that is, we pay per gallon or per million gallons. Each town is different, to allow us to send flow through their system, ultimately off to Duck Island in Lowell. It goes through their infrastructure. There's rates involved. But just to show you on the next page, from fiscal 25 to fiscal 26, in both Dracut and Lowell, the costs went up 55% in the rate per million gallons. And Dracut's costs are based on Lowell's, and our what we send directly to Lowell is based on Lowell's costs. So, and what happens is those fluctuate year to year what that rate's going to be, because it's all based on Lowell's allocable costs, both direct and indirect, and then a percentage of the flow that we're sending. So the way they look at that is they look at the entire, for instance, the city of Lowell will look at what they have for flow, and then what our percentage is of that, and they assign that percentage to the allocable costs. But just to show you, from fiscal 25 to 26, both of those went up 55%. And this is not 55% on small money. These payments, especially with Dracut and Chelmsford, are hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. With Chelmsford, they're the only one that we get fiscal 27's rate ahead of time, and that went up 23%. So these are just a few examples to show you our costs and our expenses that we're responsible for having to cover. We need to, they're going up like we haven't seen in a very long time. So just to show you how Tyngsborough's residential user fees compare to other communities. So Ty and Bond they're an engineering firm, not for us, but they do these rate studies throughout the state of Massachusetts. And what they do them every couple of years. So when we looked at our rate study this spring, we used the latest study, which was the 2024 study by Ty and Bond. So throughout all the towns in Massachusetts that have sewer, the average residential rate in 2024 was $1,139 a year for a residential property. The highest rate in Massachusetts was $3,865 a year. Okay, so you can see up there in red for fiscal 27, 28, and 29 what our projected increases are. And even if you look at fiscal 29's highest rate compared to 5 years prior across the average of Massachusetts, we're hundreds of dollars lower 5 years later. So if we could just switch to the next screen. This here, I just want to point out that, and this is really important, the Sewer Commission tries very, very hard not to raise the rates. They do whatever they can to not raise the rates if we don't have to. From fiscal 2010 through fiscal 2023, for 14 years, the rates did not go up. And you can see that shown in blue. In blue there on that graph is Tyngsborough's rates. Okay, so for 14 years, they didn't raise the rates. In fiscal 24, 25, and 26, they went up 5%, because again, we're looking at our real-time costs from the year before. When we came to this year, because of these expenses, it had to go up even further. From fiscal 24 on, in red on the graph, that is the Massachusetts average. So even, I just want you to see the comparison between what Tyngsborough is charging, even with us having to raise the rates, to what the average is in the state of Massachusetts. So we fully realize that this was an increase we had to make, but I do want to just point out that the Sewer Commission for 14 years held this back and tried very, very hard not to raise the rates. And what we had to do is we had to balance our budget from our retained earnings. But as I explained, you can't keep that going indefinitely. Part of that tie-in bond study also showed that throughout the Commonwealth of Mass, the biggest complaint and the biggest challenge that all of the towns were facing is aging infrastructure, and we're right there with them. So, a lot of our pipes, a lot of our pump stations are 25, 30 years old, and a lot of times with pumps and stuff, that's about your lifespan that you have for those. We are currently having an asset management plan done right now, which is basically surveying all of our infrastructure, which is such a great proactive tool for when you do budget, so that we can prioritize, okay, what needs to be replaced and when, and really try to, again, be as conservative as we can, but you need to be taking enough fees to keep your system running. And again, we're trying to keep that within the sewer users only and not have to come to the town at some point. And we've been very, very successful with the enterprise fund. We have not had to come to you all. We're trying to manage things as best as we can, but it does come a time when the rest of the country and the state prices are shooting up, you're getting hit by them. And you have to, we have a responsibility to keep the system running. And again, like I said, that's covering debt, it's covering capital costs, it's covering O&M, it's covering capacity, and then you really do not need to have your emergency reserves. So at that point, I'll pass it off to Jake.
I mean, at this point, if you guys have any questions, feel free to take them.
Thank you. Thank you for their presentation, Kathy.
Sure.
So I'll open it up. Select Person Marino.
Yeah, I do have a couple. I'm going to focus in specifically on the intermunicipal agreements here.
Yes.
So my first question there is, how are those increases calculated? Is this something that's negotiated every year? Is there a set escalator?
Yes.
How does that work?
So Drake gets based off of Lowell. So when Lowell sets their rate for million gallons, Drake takes that and then adds 15% before they charge us. And that's in the contract that we've had with them for years.
Okay.
Administration fees, and also we're sending flow through their pipes before it gets on to Lowell. So Lowell we have some pipes going directly to Lowell through Pawtucket Boulevard, where we're sending flow right down that street. So that's how I explained earlier, where Lowell works off of the year before, both with flow numbers and their costs. They come up with a flow ratio, and that's where we get that rate per million gallons. Drake adds 15% off of that, and Chelmsford bills us monthly, whereas Lowell bills us annually, and Drake bills us quarterly. So they take those rates. Chelmsford's are a little bit different. Chelmsford has a rate broken down per 1,000 gallons. And again, ultimately, they're sending their flow onto Lowell. They're taking into consideration what they have to pay Lowell, as well as when we send flow through Chelmsford, for instance, we go through the Southwell pump station, we're using all their infrastructure. We're using all the wear and tear on their pumps that's handling all of our flow that's going there. So just to give you an idea, our IMA with Chelmsford, we're allowed 350,000 gallons a day that we can send through. We're not at that max yet, but we're sending a lot of flow through to them. With Lowell, it's a much smaller number. We have 80,000 gallons a day directly, and then with Drake, we have up to 1 million gallons a day. Again, we're not sending that yet because we're not at full capacity. But we are sending flow through their system, so we're now taking on some of their costs as well for their pump stations, their pumps, their utilities. Everything gets kind of figured out to a flow basis because we need to pay our fair share of that as well. So when these rates, as you can see from him, sometimes they go up and down, but just from 25 to 26, it was just a huge hit. And so when we're basing our budget out, we're looking at what did we actually spend last year. We try to, I have this whole spreadsheet where I'm checking month by month, what are we doing for utility prices? They go up higher in the winter, and you're trying to guess as best you can, because with the utilities, I can't just call National Grid and say, are you expecting an increase next year? You can't really foresee that. So you have to kind of look at your history, base it as best guess as you can. But that was a big hit last year.
Okay. And let's say Lowell does a capital upgrade, they replace one of their pumps. Does their rate reflect that, or are we, if we're not using that specific pump?
Right, then we would not pay for that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah,
Perfect.
they're very specific.
Perfect.
And then with our flow numbers, we have a meter that goes on to Lowell, but for instance, like the Volk School, they pay Lowell directly, so we subtract that out. But they look at exactly what you're sending through the meters for flow, and then that's figured into a flow ratio based on their cost. So it's, all of these are done very fairly. It's not that we feel there is something unfair being done, it's just that the costs go up and it gets trickled down. So everybody's kind of realizing that and having to receive those higher numbers.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay, and then just one last quick question. The rate increases for the next 3 years, is that taking into account that aging infrastructure that might need to be replaced?
Yes, good, great question. And yes, and that would be under the category of the emergency reserve. So in the past, whatever we don't use from retained earnings to offset our budget and balance our budget, that's basically what you have remaining in case of an emergency. And we're really trying, as our infrastructure is getting older and we're seeing year by year how much we're spending on our pump station line item maintenance column, we're being very careful about trying to reserve more money for emergencies, which lessens how much we have from retained earnings to offset the budget. So we fully understand and that these are larger increases for the next year, but they're directly related to the emergency reserves, they're related to the expenses increasing, and I would say most of all to the fact that the commissioners worked so hard for 14 years not to raise the rates. And so it's just, you can only offset your budget for so long with your retained earnings. And when expenses all across the board are going up, it just, unfortunately, we have to raise the rates at this point. And we go back, so if they've set them for 27, 28, 29, when we're in fiscal 29, they'll go back and they're gonna look at all of this again, obviously, before any more rate increases. If costs have come down, if our emergency reserves are looking good, then, you know, they would absolutely take that into consideration. And again, like I said, we had 3 public meetings for this, for those reasons. We welcome people to come to our meetings for discussion, for input, for questions. So this is basically what we kind of discussed at those meetings as well.
If I may,
You
just
may.
one more quick
Absolutely.
question. So is there a limit? Because we're seeing utility costs go up and stuff, but we're bound by Prop 2.5, so we can't fully account for that. Is
Yeah.
there a check on what you guys can raise rates by, or is that just the commission making that decision?
I would say it's the commission making the decision. However, I would say, and history certainly shows, if you watch any of the meetings, they have the user ratepayers in mind always.
Okay.
They truly do. I mean, you can go back and watch any meetings. They're always very conscious about what is this gonna cost the ratepayer? You know, so what I can say is, looking at that graph, for 10 years, for 14 years, they held out as long as they possibly could. We did a few slight increases, and it just has got to a point over the past 2 years with the increases that we are seeing, they have to raise the rates in order to manage that system.
Thank you, that's all I have.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Select Person Galabos?
Thank you. And hello, pleasure meeting you. My first DBW meeting, I have these slides, I looked through them alone in a vacuum. I have a couple overall general questions and a few specific questions just to bring me up to speed, and I hope you're okay with that. Right? So I looked at the presentation, and it states why rates can increase. I'm digging a little bit to understand why the specific increase is necessary. So I'm going to ask some specific questions just for myself to come up to speed. The general question, one thing I always try to understand is the long-term picture, something that I think Select Person Marino alluded to. So are these recommendations developed using a multi-year plan? I see 24, 25, 26. So do we have a financial outlook that covers all those 3 years?
So I think a big point of the 24, 25, and 26 is we felt that seeing what we're going to need to build out on this,
Right.
we also wanted to give the ratepayers notice
Yes,
to be able to financially plan.
right,
We don't want to just every year putting it on them July 1st that,
Right.
hey, guess what, this is, so I think it was more of a also thinking of them as far as, and I think we even said this in one of those public meetings, giving them that opportunity to financial plan ahead.
Right.
But I don't know if you wanted to speak more to like the breakdown of how those came out.
Yeah, so with the increase in the rates, like Kathy mentioned, it was based off of a budget put together during one of the workshops of what it would cost to fully fund the O&M, the capital, debt, and then your capital items and the emergency reserve. So we had that number. And basically, we backed into it, so I did a calculation based upon between commercial flow, which is charged per 1,000 gallons, and then the residential fixed rate flow. I figured out how much of the flow is commercial based on how much the flow is residential, and then basically derived the cost of that. So the initial cost to backed into that number was a much larger user rate, but the commission felt that they didn't want to burden the users right on the first year, so it was roughly about a 45% increase, but they decided to break that across 3 years. So ultimately, what we're doing is we're able to fund our O&M capital replacement items, but with the thought of using just less of the retained earnings than having to use a lot more retained earnings every year and not be sustainable. And we did that the same on, as far as the commercial costs as well. We just spanned that across the first 3 years.
So for somebody as simple as me, all that means you kind of have like a 3-year lookout plan between now and 2027?
Yep.
Perfect. And when we say commission, is that DPW, elected officials?
That is the sewer commission.
Sewer, the Massachusetts Sewer Commission?
No, Tyngsborough.
The Tyngsborough Sewer Commission.
So we have a
Gotcha.
3-member elected board.
Right. So when we say commission, it's our sewer commission.
Yes.
That sets the rates, and they don't go through town meeting for approval, right? That's how they move forward?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that understanding. So if I look at your sewer user rate presentation, it said that we had 3 sessions and public hearing.
Yes,
How many people took advantage of that?
nobody.
0, right?
We didn't have anybody show up for any of them.
Right.
And the last one where the vote was being taken, in addition to your regular agenda
Right.
posting, and it was posted in the Lowell Sun as well, because you
Right.
have to do that for the public hearings.
Right. Yeah, so I understand, I remember seeing that from the town meeting, right? You know,
Yeah.
you do your best effort to socialize it. People, just like for the fire station committee, maybe don't attend, so I imagine they've seen it. But when we were there and we look at the 3-year costs that we have here in the intermunicipal agreement rate increase, you know, and I did the math and it was talked about at the meeting, that's a 51% increase over 3 years, right? Which is a shock to anybody. So I'm looking at the intermunicipal agreement rate increase, it's got the 51%. It's hard for me to compare apples to apples within different towns, because for Drake and Lowell, we talk about M gallons, which I imagine is millions of gallons.
Yes,
And for us, we talk thousands of gallons.
yes.
So the 2 different units of measure, it's hard for me to compare. Can you help me understand the reasoning behind that?
That's what those towns decide. So the city of Lowell
Yes,
sets their rate on their billing per million gallons.
yes,
Drake follows suit with that.
Yes.
They do the same, plus the 15% that they charge us.
right,
And Chelmsford does it per 1,000 gallons.
Okay.
That's the way it's the way that they bill and set those rates. So we don't, I'm just showing you what they sent to
gotcha.
us.
And we bill per 1,000 gallons as well?
No, so when we do, no, so residential is a flat rate,
Okay, so it's a flat rate.
Yes.
Question, sorry to stop.
That's okay.
So if I take a shower every day, 365 days a year, Mr. Marino, as I know, takes one once a month, we're gonna pay the same water rate?
Sewer.
Sewer rate,
So we don't,
not water, sewer.
correct, so we don't
Okay.
even look at water, because not every resident in town is on municipal water.
Right,
And so years ago, the commission wanted to be very fair and consistent with residential. So some people are on wells, which we would not be able to measure.
Yeah.
Some are on meters. So to be consistent, it's just a flat rate across the board for residential. Commercial, on the other hand, is billed based on water meter readings.
so sewer rates a flat. We
For
don't-
residential,
For residential.
Yes.
We don't look at how much water they consume,
correct.
and it's just a fixed rate. Each homeowner, regardless of how much water runs into the sewer, pays the same rate.
Correct.
And those rates is what we have in the sewer user rate presentation. $520, $546, $574.
Correct.
So that's what-
That's annual?
Okay.
Yeah.
So regardless of the size of your property, number of bathrooms, I'm sorry for all the simple questions.
No, that's
Just
fine.
trying to understand.
Yeah.
How much water you use, how big your house is, it's the same rate for everybody.
Correct, because there would be really no way that we could, if people aren't all on water, we have no way to measure. You know, you'd be talking about all these residences in town and how many people live in your house, and are you home all the time? Do you go to Florida over the winter? Do you have little kids at home? Are people there? Do you have a daycare? It's just, it would be impossible without having a water meter to be able to do that. So whether you are in a condominium and you're a couple, or you're in a home that has a family of 7, it's the same rate, residential. Yeah,
Because we don't have meters.
correct, because not everybody is on municipal water. So some people have wells,
But they're still on sewer?
correct?
Really?
Yes.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that. A few more questions, bear with me. You know, in here, we have a number of comparisons between our rates and, you know, other towns.
Yes.
And, you know, you've mentioned, and I think I understood that, you know, each town is different, they have different debt, they have different treatment plans, you know, customer base, capital assets than us. So looking at these rates, you know, it's hard for me, you know, I see the numbers, it's hard for me to kind of understand the why. I can understand why they can be increased. It's hard for me to glean out why they're being increased. Is it all like, how much of this rate goes to the state and how much is set by us locally? I guess is my first question.
So the rates are set locally. The
So-
state, so this is just a comparison to show you that, so that people, because a lot of times when you have rates set, residents may want to know, how does that compare to other towns in Massachusetts?
Sure.
And that's basically what this is. It's just to show you,
Sure,
because Ty and Bond does this study.
right,
So across the entire state of Massachusetts, the average in 2024 was $11.39 annually.
yeah,
Average.
yeah,
The high was over almost $4,000 a
Yeah,
year. So it's just to show you that comparison. I know
Right.
every town's different, every population
Right.
size is different.
I don't know what to do with that comparison, I'm not thinking through it, so let me ask the question a different way. So whatever, the rate for fiscal 2027 is going to be $660.30.
Yes.
How much of that is set by Massachusetts Commission, and how much is set by us?
It's set by us.
All $660.30. And am I out of my scope to ask, how did we come up with the $660.30? Is there like a breakdown? Not that you have to provide it now, but how do we come to that number? I see, you know, we need $100,000 for this. I understand some of our, you know, pumps and the life, but how do we come to $660.30?
Came to that number by taking the FY26 budget when we worked through the scenario.
Yeah,
And basically had a budget created that fully included the operation and maintenance, capital, emergency reserves, which is what's recommended to include.
Right.
And then as far as having enough money for your largest capital items. So that total budget number was worked into a series of calculations
all right,
that generated a number that we needed,
Right.
but because that increase was so much compared to what we're charging now,
right.
we span that across 3 years.
Okay, so that's where you say in the user rate presentation, and again, sorry for the questions, be my last time until I get a baseline, but we want to have an emergency reserve of 25% of our operational maintenance costs,
Yes.
right? And what's that number? Is that
That number,
millions? Is that-
based on the FY26 budget, is just shy of 550,000.
550,000?
Yep.
Okay, and then it says, we want to set an amount to replace the largest capital item, and we want to have some amount of money in the kitty,
Yep,
right? So the largest capital item is how much that we're planning for?
150,000.
Okay, 150. Okay, and we want to maintain what, a 3-month, 6-month, 1-year buffer in cash as you're putting this budget in place?
I'm sorry, I don't know what
As-
you're asking for that.
As far as the buffer, that would be operation and maintenance for 25%.
Okay.
But then we also have other capital needs.
Okay, and those capital needs do not go to the Capital Asset Management Committee, they're dealt here.
So
Under this
as part
cost.
of our budget, we do send, even though the town is not funding it and the sewer ratepayers are funding it,
Right.
we always send with our budget, our sheet with all of our lists so that it's very transparent
Okay.
of what we're budgeting for capital items.
Okay.
So it does go in front of them.
Right. Not to belabor, and just because I'm interested, and, you're the professional. Is it okay if I reach out to you offline at some point in time and you can kind of educate me on some of these things?
Yeah.
Or is that uncalled for? Plus, we could get to meet and I can understand the challenges and what's going on with the DPW. My last question, and thank you for your patience. You shared on the last slide, if I could get to it, that we haven't raised prices for like 14 years. And, you socialize it as we're trying to save the taxpayer money, and we do for 14 years. As a layman looking into it, I'm trying to understand how we kept up with inflation and operating costs if we didn't raise the budget. Like, how were we working on those 14 years?
Offsetting it by retained earnings.
And retained earnings is what? Comes from where?
So retained earnings is at the end of the year, they look at what your revenue you took in minus your expenses.
Right.
And whatever you had that you didn't use from
So
the
it's
previous
paying
years.
for itself.
It's like free cash for the
Right,
town.
right.
It's the same thing, but
So-
for the enterprise fund.
So it's paying for itself over a 14-year time period.
Keep in mind as well that like for, and a good example would be, for instance, when the Enclave project was in front of the
Yes.
town. So for a good year or two, we were getting a lot of connection fees in, which
Right.
helps sustain things. So there's been a
understood.
lot of different development
Understood.
projects
Right.
over time
Right.
that have helped that year or those 3 years.
Okay.
That's extra income that isn't going to last. Now we won't get any more
Sure.
Toll Brothers
Sure.
connection fees, but you've had those projects over time.
Right.
So it's helped you to be able to sustain it without having to go to the user.
I have a
Repairs.
skeletal understanding of, the good work that you're doing and how we got here and how many comes through. And when we meet, I'll get to know a little bit more, which is good. It's disheartening that when we have these open meetings that we can't get people to show up or we don't communicate properly, whatever the rationale is. All those together, I can understand the shock, and it is a shock for people that have sewer to sit there and say, my 52, I'm gonna get a 52% increase over a 3-year time period, and I don't see a change. So that's a challenge that you have to work through, and I wish you lots of luck. And thank you for answering my questions and for doing the job you do, and I'll reach out to you in a week or two.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Select Person Kellabokas. I think best practice dictates that you work through Colin to schedule,
Oh.
right?
I'll work through Colin to schedule. We'll have Colin come with us. I don't want to break any
Coordinate through
rules.
Colin.
Right.
Thank you.
I will ask Colin when I can talk to you, and he'll give us permission, and then I'll come talk to
He'll
you.
set up a play date.
I'll
Exactly.
set up a play date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Select Person
Learning the
Kellabokas.
rules.
Thank you. What percentage of the town is on sewer now?
Well, I can tell you, I can't tell you the percentage because I'm not sure, but the number of residential, we have over 2,200 accounts?
Yeah,
I would say for-
2,435.
Okay.
Okay, so that's about a 25%, give or take. Well, no, because that wouldn't be home, so it's
No, it's
probably
almost
higher.
half. Yeah, it's almost
almost
half.
half, right? Give or take?
I think we have.
Yeah, that's probably a fair.
Between
Yeah.
40, 50, give or take? No. Got it.
No,
And
I don't know how that math works.
no. I'm sorry.
There's probably something like 4,700 properties. high 4,000s.
Okay, I'm sorry. I
Give or
spoke up.
take 10%, half. Got it?
I hear you. I
We're
don't
at half.
get it. I hear you.
Give or
though.
take. It's not everybody, but it's a good percentage. So it is disheartening to see that people aren't there, but that's not related to you folks. I was gonna say it's a load of crap, but that's a cheap joke. The net on it is people should care because this does impact, a lot of our municipal buildings are on this, so it does hit us tax-wise. The emergency reserves that you're looking to get to is 550K. That's what you want to have as a balance in there on an ongoing basis. What is it at now?
It's at whatever is left over that you haven't, so when we balance the budget with the retained earnings,
Yep.
it doesn't mean we're actually gonna spend that amount of retained
Yeah.
earnings, just to balance the budget.
Right.
So it's whatever is left over. When you, through DOR, when I put in an amount that we're gonna offset the budget with, whatever's remaining is all we have access to use until the next year when retained earnings get closed out. So whatever wasn't used in retained earnings, that's what we have as our emergency.
But you don't know what that number is.
I mean, I do, not in front of me, it would be with my budget.
Is it less than 550 or more than?
Yeah, oh, it's less than 550.
Okay.
Yes. So I believe for fiscal 2027, I believe it was, I want to say maybe in about the $150,000 range.
That's a good number to start with, just to sit there and say from that, because that's a low number, given the number of things, so that's, we have to materially increase it.
Yeah.
You guys, you still have a stabilization fund too, right? If I'm not mistaken, or is that is the stabilization fund?
Yeah, we just have the retained earnings.
Just the retained earnings? Okay,
Yes.
Got it. What is the recommended, so you're trying to get to 25%. Is 25% the recommended amount?
It is,
Okay,
yes.
across municipalities?
I don't know about across municipalities. So years ago, the state has their own best practices
Yeah.
guidelines. Years ago, they had a professional rate study done, and that was the recommendation, that when you go to emergency reserves, it's 25% of your O&M and your largest capital item replacement.
So you're trying to get back to what the state
The
recommended, the
recommended.
last ones?
Yes.
Okay. And it looks like Chelmsford is 2 times the cost, because I had to do the math in my head, because one was in thousands and other was in millions, but if I'm not reading this incorrectly, but if Chelmsford's at 6.54 for 1,000 gallons, that means they're at 6,540 per 1,000,000 gallons, which puts them at about double what Drake it is, which is, 15%, even more than that, less than Lowell. So my question is, should we be putting more through some of the others versus Chelmsford because of cost, but we've got a capacity issue that we're trying to navigate through?
So the problem with that, Chelmsford is the one that we have the capacity issue with.
Right.
To redirect that flow, we have actually talked about that and looked at that to save for capacity, to redirect some of that flow, because we currently have a force main that goes over the Tyngsborough Bridge
Right.
from the Phase 2 project, and that goes to Lowell, to Drake it.
Yep.
But to redirect some of the Chelmsford flow to Drake it would be very, very expensive.
Yeah, you gotta do pumps and you gotta change, so,
The infrastructure
Okay.
and everything, and it's just, I think it was over $1 million, it could have been several. I don't-
Yeah, and it's not recommended to put a force main into another force main.
totally get it, just wanted, because I was looking at the numbers. Is there anything that we're doing to reduce our sewer output, right? So we got stormwater and things like that get in there. Are we doing anything, because, ultimately, the numbers is gonna keep getting bigger, stormwater becomes a bigger problem on this. Are we doing anything to address those types of issues that you can give a
Yes, we're
brief type of
currently
thing?
wrapping up an I&I program, which is, we have consultants in that are.
You're gonna wanna not use the acronym because the people on TV won't have any idea what you're saying.
It's
Infiltration and
infiltration
inflow.
inflow.
Got it,
Yep.
thank you.
And then we are doing a study with that, which correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, we're doing actually the Chelmsford side of town.
Yeah.
And from that, we'll build a project off of and address any issues that we see during that study.
Yeah, so
And some of the money from this theoretically should go to help some of those things as you get
That's
more,
great.
because you got to pay for it, and somewhere, the money's going to come from somewhere.
Right, so we got a grant through the congressionally directed spending. So with those grants, 80% is funded by the federal government, and you have to match 20% on that. So currently, they're working on, they do it through CCTV, cameraing the pipe.
Yep.
They're doing manhole inspections, they're doing meterings, and what they do is, the goal is to try to find clean water that's getting into your system, because you don't want that, because we're paying for every gallon that goes through the meters. So the goal is, in the state, DEP is, mandates that as well. All municipalities in Massachusetts, you're trying to get as much I out of your system. So that could be something as simple as, look, for inflow, like people have some pumps hooked up and they're putting them into the sewer system, which they should not.
Yep.
So we had one whole study done on the Drake side of town, where they were able to see through smoke testing and so forth, houses that were doing that. So we went out, we had them disconnect it, get it out of the system. We do annual re-inspections on those properties to make sure that they have not reconnected the sump pumps. And then there might be something at, like, you have a crack in a pipe, or it's in your manhole needs to be sealed better, or something where rainwater and storm water is getting into your system. So at the end of the study, we will then move forward at the recommendation of our engineers to see what has to be rehabbed now. When we did the rehab on the Drake side a couple of years ago, we had to take out a borrowing for that. So yes, that's part of our debt service, is we're trying to follow the state guidelines to keep that clean water out of the system, which is also ultimately helping the ratepayers, because we're trying to keep the IMA costs down and only be paying for storage. We don't want to be paying for people's sump pump clean water. So when we reach out to the people that have been identified as having sump pumps, we send educational letters, and we also, we have tables, booths set up at all the Board of Health fairs, and we try to really engage the public to understand what we're trying to do, because it saves them money as well, so, but like Jake said, that's what the capacity project is doing right now. That's our goal, is to get, it's twofold. It's gonna help you with your costs that you're paying through the meter, but it's also going to open up more capacity, because if we're limited on, you can only send this many gallons a day, the more we can get out of clean water, or it's opening up to let more people connect to our system, which is the ultimate goal. Another point that Jake had brought up when he was working on all this was, we're not at capacity for connections. So we're still having to pay to run all these 17 pump stations, but we're not getting user fees in from everybody, because not everybody's connected. That's a big thing too. When you have everybody in town, or your capacity, everyone can connect that has sewer available, the more user fees you're getting in, it's gonna lower the cost for everybody else, because we're working off a smaller number of users are paying for a system that not everybody's tied into yet. So that's another factor in all of this as well. I know that
Also, with running a sewer system, you can't be reactive, because then you'll end up having overflows and
You mean like Haverhill?
bigger issues.
And that's where I was going, because I think from a capacity standpoint, we ultimately want to make sure that yes, we have capacity to send it downstream, but they have capacity problems, and so it's in our best interest to go through and do it. So that was really, I just want to make sure. And I would, as you're notifying people about the increases, I would definitely highlight how we're trying to take some of that, the good water out of the sewerage, because that will resonate with people, especially right now, because of what's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I have no other questions.
Thank you, sir. Select Person Coughlin.
Yes, thank you. So when I read this, I went right to the end at FY29. I saw that my sewer annual rate's going to go up to $873. And I was kind of shocked. Well, not kind of, I was very shocked. But for 14 years, it didn't go up because we had these retained earnings or extra money in the coffers or whatever. Why wouldn't we have that now? So if I'm looking at $873, so 25% of that is over and above what's going to go into the coffers, basically. So 873, 29, 20, and 25% of that is for the retained earnings?
If I could jump in really quick on that, there's a difference between the retained earnings and that 25%. Retained earnings, Kathy talked about the period of time where we had a lot of connection fees. Those connection fees are over and above what we anticipate getting from the budget's perspective. So that's revenue that they collected that they didn't budget to spend. So just like town meeting approves the general fund budget, there's an article at every town meeting where town meeting says to the sewer commission, even though it's independent of the select board, yes, you can spend this money. That's based on the revenues they can expect. What they don't count on is the connection fees. So when people are connecting, you're generating all these connection fees, that's what becomes your retained earnings. It's like our free cash, revenue above what we planned. The 25% that they're talking about is built into the budget. That's not really lining the coffers. That's to deal with the emergencies that come up that would have otherwise been unbudgeted. The problem with as you're not expanding anymore, you're not getting the connection fees. So the revenue you're collecting now is largely what you're budgeting from the user fees. So as they've over 14 years spent down the retained earnings to keep the rate the same, they're not seeing that same increase in revenue because the user fees are part of the budget, whereas those connection fees, which only come when you expand, and we're not doing any expansion right now, aren't happening. So the 25% is separate from the retained earnings, and because we spent it down over 14 years, that number is no longer in a place where it can support capital projects and sustain the sewer rate, if that makes sense.
So the 873 is what will get the sewer department sort of
Operating.
operating.
Yeah. And account for the emergencies that come up, and they do come up, is the
Right.
reality.
And just to build on what Colin was just saying as well, when you are estimating your budget, DOR also, like even with your user fees, when we look in, we're only allowed, so in December when I'm trying to estimate my fiscal 27 budget, and I'm looking at all the current users that we have on the system, I'm not allowed to, if I know there's a residential new project coming into town, I can't count that unless they're connected to the system. DOR has very strong guidelines, and they're good reasons. They don't want, because if something happens to that project or there's a delay and that money doesn't come in, DOR does not want to see the enterprise fund have to rely on the town. So they're you have to budget very, very conservatively. And so you have to wait until people are physically connected before you can then start. I mean, we go to the point that when we're doing the budget, and I look at anyone who's even connected that year, I'm figuring out how many months out of the year have they connected, because I'm not gonna look at, we didn't get a full year user fee. So you have to kind of be very specific with your calculations as well. They don't want you, and that's almost to the point of the connection fees too. Unless you know it's coming in and it's a done deal, you can't use that in your projections. So what does come in that you didn't estimate, that's gonna close out to your retained earnings, like Colin was saying. You're gonna realize that the next year. So we've been able to, between unexpected connections, projects that come into town, commercial projects, we've been able to use that money to offset and keep those rates down as long as we could. But with the expenses now, Enclave being done, we don't have any projects on the horizon, big residential projects to have new users connect. And the other point I wanted to make too, we had two major projects. We had the Phase 1 West project, which was done in 2018, and the Phase 2 project, which was done in 2021. That's when they finished. Those were betterment projects. So any person that, under Mass General Law, that connected to those systems, they paid a betterment. Those are completely separate funds. Those don't go into the enterprise fund. That is specifically to pay for that project's debt. So they don't pay connection fees. If you were assessed a betterment, your betterment covers your connection fee. So when we're also looking at trying to estimate connection fees that could come in, most of our people who are going to connect are on our new lines. That money, that we're not going to get a connection fee from that. So our connections now, the only connection fees I can really anticipate are on old lines in town. Maybe there was a neighborhood over near Drake that just, that resident decided, yeah, there's been a line here for 20 years, but my septic's been great. I haven't had a need to connect. So you're gonna have one or two, maybe three of those off ones that come in, but it's not something you can count on and predict. until they connect, and then the following year, it's going to come in as part of your user fees. But you can't project that if they're not on the system. So we're doing the best we can to calculate the revenue coming in, and as Jake explained, that's how that scenario of where those rates came from was looking at the fiscal, that's not even looking at fiscal 27, 28, or 29's budget, which hopefully these expenses don't keep going at the rate they're going in. But, you know, we're trying very hard to have specific emergency reserves as well, because that's very, very important. And as every year that our infrastructure gets older, you know, you have to take that into consideration, and we don't want to come to the town in an emergency situation saying, you know, we just had this major infrastructure break and we need money. We're trying to be fiscally responsible and plan for this stuff.
Thank you.
Mr. Wickens?
I'm Darrell Wickens, a member of the Sewer Commission. And I think to your question about what's going to happen in 2030, nobody knows. As one member of the board, I can't tell you what's going to happen then. This gets us up to a level playing field. Unfortunately, it's a steep jump over 3 years. There's no getting around that. I think in hindsight, every year, the commission should have looked at rate of inflation, maybe padded a little bit for expense increases, and done that 45% over a much smaller slope. Didn't happen. We looked at ways to get from point A to point C, and there was no good way. As Jake said, you could go 45% in 1 year. You could go over 5 or 6 years, but then in year 4 and 5, you haven't calculated what that increase could have been. So I think if you look at the dollar amount, going from 660 to 873 over those 3 years, for a household, it's $100 or a couple $100 a year. Now, any increase, it's money out the door, but I think it's the dollar amount you should really look at. It's a fairly good deal to be hooked up to the residential portion, right? I'm a commercial user, and I voted for even a higher increase that's going to impact my wallet, because there's no way you have to get there, right? It's a numbers problem. I think on the expense side or the reduction side, Selectman Eldridge hit it right on the head. The I&I, keeping costs down, maintaining pump stations. We have 2 employees basically besides Kathy. Kathy counts for 3 employees, as you can tell. She knows the system cold. They do a very efficient job. I don't know how many folks Drake it has, but we do it with basically 2 folks that run the whole system. And they're dedicated. They know every pipe, where it goes, every manhole. So we look at the expense side, and we'll also look at the how to reduce those costs, right? But I can tell you, I think in 2030, if things don't go completely wacky, we'll look at more of a gradual increase. We won't. I don't believe it'll be 0. I'm talking for one member. I'm one of 3 that vote on that. But I think we can then get on a more sustained, real life, inflation beating type increase.
Thank you, Mr. Wickens.
That's all I had.
All right. I'd love to say I'm going to keep this short, but the conversation's been so good, and I have 1,000 questions. I was going to ask about attendance of the public hearings. It's really unfortunate to hear that no one attended the 3 of them. More of a note for Colin than for you two. We often hear things like this, that a hearing occurred, and I recognize that the reason that we highlight that is to make a point to say that an opportunity was given to residents to be heard. I would love, going forward, at any point if we hear that a hearing occurred, I would love for us to just be transparent upfront with how many people attended, because if we hear there were 3 hearings but no one attended, the reality is that that was not effective. Whether it occurred or not, ultimately for our knowledge, the sake of hearing that, so if we can just make sure that if a hearing is mentioned, that we actually have stats on who attended, how many people attended, I should say. Mm-hmm. Okay. For the sewer user rate presentation slide about the 25%, if you could just clarify, it's 25% of the O&M plus 100% of the highest capital item.
Yeah, and so when we looked at the highest capital item, I think we based it on a generator or.
Yes.
Because in reality, you could have a major
Of course.
infrastructure that's gonna cost you much more than that. A pump station alone's about $1 million, but it's not like you're gonna lose a whole pump station, right?
Yeah.
So we were trying to look at what would be a piece of infrastructure that you need to run that. And so I think we based that off a generator.
Okay, so like our benchmark is the 150,000, which Jake mentioned, is the generator. And then what is the O and M number? Or what's the 25% of the O and M number?
It was about 550,000.
That was the 550. So it's 550 plus the 150,000 is like the number that we're seeking, right? I just want to make sure that like I'm making sense of that. Okay, perfect. This is maybe a silly one, but the next slide about the odor controls, is it the odors are increasing or the cost to mitigate them are increasing?
The cost to mitigate them. So a lot of this is somewhat new because when we, a lot of that cost has to do with force mains. And when you have the force mains, you use bioxide, which not only helps with odor downstream, but it also helps to stop corrosion in your pipes. So this is an odor control measure that's also helping to maintain your infrastructure so you're not having to replace it as often. But with, like, for instance, the Phase 2 project, we have force mains that were brought on from that as well. So when you have more force mains put in, you technically, that's when you're treating more for odor control and stuff. In addition to that, they have things that degrease, so there's not an odor from the grease in the wet wells, odor blocks. There's a variety of them, but I know the number because I literally have to be like, how many Phillips did you need at this? And then I'm contacting vendors. What do you charge per how many gallons? So we are truly trying to get real numbers out there. But when you just look at odor control, I mean, $46,000 a year, it's not a small cost. And that's something that I think is very important because that's the part that's gonna impact residents who have a pump station in the
Quality of
neighborhood,
life, absolutely.
right? So we're trying. We really, truly, our guys are out there whenever they can. They're trying. We get, that's probably the biggest thing we do get a complaint on. And immediately, we're trying to address that. And trying to be proactive by budgeting so that we have the material to immediately address that.
And I do want to recognize and acknowledge for the group, for the public, we heard from a resident a few weeks ago, I think, and I want to say it was like a Friday afternoon, concern, pointed out that the smell was really bad, it's been hot, we've had a lot of heat waves. By the following Monday, it was already addressed and the resident was praising the team. So thank you for just the responsiveness of the whole team and being able to do that and having the materials on hand to be able to react quickly because it really does make a difference.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. I think we've talked a lot about the intermunicipal agreement rate increases. I do have questions just in terms of like it just sort of stinks that we can't control what they're billing us. Like we're beholden to their rates because we need them in order to get the sewage to Duck Island. So, there's nothing really that you can do to solve that, but.
No, but in their defense, because I think that's the fair thing to say, they itemize all their costs as well. So, and there is a very specific formula that's used, and they're very transparent about, this is what we got for flow, this is what you're contributing. I'm now checking our own meter readings against theirs. So to be fair, I feel as though they are very transparent when they bill us. I think like we're seeing high costs, I think those other towns are seeing high costs as well. And so they get passed on. It's the nature of the business, unfortunately, and we don't have any control over it. But I think they're all feeling the same things we are, you know?
Well, that's very kind of you. I did have a lot of questions that I think have been answered throughout the presentation and the questions. I didn't realize that it was a flat rate, so that was really helpful. I was going to ask a lot of questions about consumption. That is not worth having a conversation about. I love hearing about the study and about how we can reduce that clean water that's entering the system. If there are more mitigation factors or things that the residents can be doing to contribute, I think everyone would really love to hear that. Because I think it's hard for a resident to just see the price. And even if you explain the why, and you give all of the background, all of the justification, you show them the numbers, feeling like you have no control over the situation is hard. And so if we could meaningfully say, here's how you reduce your, whatever that looks like, I don't know. And that's why I was thinking about consumption-based. But if that's something we can talk about. I also did not realize that it wasn't explicitly tied to water use, and I think that was something that came up.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if residents really understand and appreciate that. I'm thinking about my own experience living in other communities, and I think our sewer was something like 2 times the rate of our water usage. And so I think I've just assumed that that's how it was here. I haven't thought about it at all, but the fact that it is only going to, it has to go to all residents, it's not just those that are on, right? Hang on, let me make sure that I understand that. If someone's on septic, are they a ratepayer?
We have nothing to do with them. No.
So it's just the people that are tied into the system?
Correct, but some of the, I think what you might be thinking is anyone who's connected to sewer, some are on a well and some are on municipal water.
Yes, okay.
So that's where that difference is, that
Yes.
we had to be consistent in a flat rate because we can't meter anyone who's on a well, and we're trying to keep the rates even for residential. What I would just like to take the opportunity to say is I welcome anybody, please, at any time, call the office, because quite often things get posted online and nobody calls. And I welcome that. Anytime, come by, call. I'm happy to sit down with anybody. I'm happy to go through anything. And we don't have a lot of that
Yeah.
people reach out. They read something, but they don't call us to get explanations, and we welcome that. That's what we're here for. I mean, we're here to serve the public, so please,
This
call us, come
presentation,
see us.
I mean, the value that you've been able to share tonight, I mean, I think we're at about an hour. This has been so valuable to be able to have this conversation and to understand the numbers better. And while we don't influence the sewer rates and that these are set for the next 3 years, I mean, that it's done. I think this has been incredibly valuable. So I really am grateful for the time for you all, from Mr. Wickens. I think there's so much more that we could be talking about, but I think that's probably a good place for us to stop.
Just one,
Please?
because you raised something.
Yeah.
So, flat rate for residentials, again, an assumption, I won't give you myself. What is it for industry and businesses? Are they a flat rate as well, or is there
No,
some form?
so businesses are based on water meter readings.
Okay,
Yes,
so
and
it's, for them, it's how much water they use and
Correct.
goes into the sewer system.
which gives them a little bit more control
Right.
over, because a lot of times they might have a sprinkler system or something.
Right,
And if
right.
that's not separately metered,
Understood,
they pay, yeah.
understood. So businesses have water meters and
Correct.
sewer, just like you had where you lived before, where I lived before.
Yes.
It's all residential. And how much of revenue comes from business versus residents? Just a rough cut. Sorry.
No, you're totally fine.
The way that I broke it, believe it or not, 75% of the usage through the system is residential and 25%. So
Okay.
majority of the revenue coming in through residential use.
Everything comes from residents, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Welcome.
I meant to ask, are there relief programs for seniors, for people that are low income or have hardships, anything like that?
We currently don't have that,
Okay.
no.
I'll just say that out loud. Maybe that's something to consider, but obviously it needs to then be offset by some other income somewhere else. So, Colin, from your office, it sounds like residents aren't necessarily calling the sewer department to talk about this, but is your office getting any calls or complaints, concerns about, I guess they really haven't seen this major increase yet. When did the FY27 bills go out?
So those will go out in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
For commercial.
Okay,
Residential go out in September and March. So September covers July 1st through December 31st, and March covers January 1st through June 30th.
will you give me those dates one more time?
Yep, so the September bill will cover July 1st through December 31st, and then the March bill covers January 1st through June 30th. So we bill about halfway through that half of a year.
Okay,
So they'll see that in September. The commercial will see it in July. They get billed, commercial gets billed quarterly. I did just want to mention as well, and this is just an idea for out there, it would be too soon to put into play this year, but one of our commissioners also did say, you know, if it was helpful to the residents, we could also consider going quarterly. If that splits it up, if you're taking that 660 and dividing it by 4 and you're paying 150 every 3 months, if that's helpful to people, we could certainly look at that, because right now we do biannually for residential and quarterly for commercial. But the commission, that was one commissioner's, they'd all have to vote on that, but he did mention that after town meeting, that he'd be willing to talk about that. That might be helpful to people, just to kind of spread that out a little bit financially.
Great, something to consider. Any other comments or questions from the board? This has been so lovely. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you for your thoughtfulness of this, and if anyone else does want to meet with the sewer department, work through Colin, and I hope we get people calling you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.